Hey guys, welcome back. And yes, my daughter's hand was in the picture, but it'll be okay. Okay, so yesterday we talked about the coordinate plane. We talked about ordered pairs, the x values, the y values. I did mention tables. We talked about the tables more in the guided practice. But today we are going to look some more at tables, and we're also going to talk about some more terms that you need to know. All right. So we're going to look at two types of tables. We're going to look at a vertical table. Ooh. And we're going to look at a horizontal table. Remember, these are your X's. These are your Y's. First, second. First, second. So these are X's. These are Y's. All right. Now, I also told you yesterday that your X values are your input and your Y values are your output. Okay, and that's still true. So if I give you 2 as your input, what is your output? I'm asking for your Y value. Okay. So that still rings true. But I also want to talk to you about a couple other terms that you're going to hear when you're dealing with these tables. All right, we still got that glare. Okay. So another set of terms that you're going to hear are your independent variable, and your dependent variable. Now, your X, your input, it is also considered or called your independent variable. Okay? Think about it this way. Input starts with an I, independent starts with an I. So those two go together. Now, your Y is your output, but it's also considered your dependent variable. And this is why. Because this is why for your Y's. Your Y value depends on your X value. So when we're getting deeper into this in the next few weeks, after Christmas, you're going to start understanding that a little bit more. But the output values depend on the input. So it's your dependent variable. So Y is your dependent, X is your independent. So if I give you a list of numbers or ordered pairs and I say, what are your independent variables or values? I'm asking for your X values. If I say, oh, what are your dependent values? I'm asking for your Y values. Okay. So if I'm looking at my X's and my Y's here, if I say that's -1, 3, that's 2, -6, that's 0, 5, and that's -1, 0. All of these are your input and your independent variables. Okay, so this is your input. Oopsie. And they're also called your independent variables. Now, here's where the whole dependent variable comes into play and output. So if I put these numbers in, this is what I'm getting out. Okay? If these are independent, these numbers depend on what the numbers here are. Now, very quickly, I'm going to show you what I mean just to give you an idea of what that all means. Because if you're like me, I'm sitting here, I would be sitting in class going, but why? All right, so let's say I give you this. So Y equals X plus 4. And I tell you that your X values are, we're going to change this now. well, we could have left the x values. All right. So let's say we've got, I don't know, -1, 0, 2, and 3. So here's your x values. These are your input. I want to know what your output is. I want to know what your dependent values are. Now, remember when we, I don't know, about a month ago, where you were given an inequality or an equation and then a set of numbers and it said, are these solutions? I was getting you ready for this. You're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to take these x values and I'm going to plug them in for x and I'm going to solve for y, just like what we were doing about a month ago. The difference is we tried to see, did one side match up with the other side, or was the statement true at the end? Now we are literally just plugging in numbers. So I'm trying to solve for y. Remember y? I'm going to literally do it in order. So my first one is going to be y equals, but instead of x, we're going to plug in what x is. So in this case, x is -1 and then +4. Oh, sign rules. Miss Long told you weren't going to get away from sign rules. I told you so. Okay, so this -1, it's obviously negative. This is a +4. Are my signs the same or different? They're different. So you subtract and you keep the sign of your larger number. What's bigger, 1 or 4? 4 is bigger, so our answer will be positive. So if x is -1, that means y equals, now remember, we're subtracting, and it's positive, so y equals 3. So if my input value is -1, my output value is 3. If my independent variable is value is -1, then my dependent value is 3 because it depends on this number right here. Now, let's go to the next one. So we have 0. So now, number 2, y equals 0 plus 4. What is anything plus 0? Itself, right? So 0 plus 4 is 4. So y equals 4. So that's my output. That's my dependent. Now, let me talk about something real quick right here. When x is 0, remember this is your y-intercept. This is going to come into play and be very important when we start talking about lines and equations of lines and graphing lines and all that good jazz, okay? So you got to remember that this is your y-intercept. So anytime you have 0 as an x, that's going to be your y-intercept. That's where it's going to cross the y-axis. That's where that point's going to be, is right there on that y-axis. It is the y-intercept. That's why those vocabulary words are so important. All right, so now let's look at the third one. So now x is 2. So right here, I'm going to plug in 2. So y equals 2 plus 4. They're both positive. My signs are the same. What do I do when my signs are the same? I add and I keep the sign. So that means that y equals 6. So if my input is 2, my output is 6. And then the last one, we're going to use 3 now. So y equals, but instead of x, I'm using 3 because that's what they gave me as my value for x. And then plus 4. Again, they're both positive. If my signs are the same, I add and keep sign. So y equals 7. So if my input value is 3, my output value is 7. So that looks the same whether it's a vertical chart or a horizontal chart. Okay, so it looks the same here. So -1, 3, 0, 4, 2, 6, 3, 7. Doesn't matter. It looks the same. They just wrote it sideways this time. It doesn't matter how they give it to you. Okay, it's still a table, a graphing table. So then you would use these and you would plot them on your graph just like we were working on yesterday. Okay? All right. So that's dealing with tables. That's talking about your input, your output, your independent, your dependent. So now you need to go to your Google Slides. You need to do the guided practice with me for today, Tuesday. And then you need to do your MOL. And then tomorrow, we will start talking about constant rate of change, constant of proportionality, whether things are proportional or not, so on and so on. All right? So go do your guided practice, finish up your Google Slides, do your MOL for the day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.